it's emerged that more than 21,000 asylum seekers have now gone missing, completely missing in Britain in the last 5 years alone. Home Office officials have been unable to locate at least 21,107 foreign nationals who claimed to be refugees. And even more worryingly, the true figure could be even much, much higher, as the information only covers the 5 years up to last September. So there's a missing 8 months. I'm going back now to Dr. Alan Mendoza for your take on this. It's an astonishing state of affairs. Most people watching this wouldn't even be able to get their heads around the fact we can simply lose more than 21,000 people who've been refused asylum or their claims have been dismissed. They have no right to be in this country. Presumably, they should be deported, and they've simply vanished into thin air.
Well, in one sense, I'm sort of surprised the number is so low, not so high, because what are the methods we're actually using to tracking people? Once we've made these decisions, we're not putting them under any surveillance, not putting them under any ability to track them. If I was someone who was determined to stay in the country, I'd skip away, wouldn't I? I'd go and say I've got no monitoring on me. I'll just melt away and see what happens. And so clearly there has been a problem long in the making. We should have understood that people aren't going to play by the rules. They're not going to sit back waiting to be deported. They will take matters into their own hands and try and flee. So the question is, what are we going to do about this going forwards? A, how do we find the people who've already disappeared? But B, how are we going to prevent future such examples from happening? That clearly needs a much tougher regime once a decision is made to make sure people cannot escape justice, as it were.
OK, Dr. Mendoza, let's drill into that a bit more. Earlier on the show, we spoke to Harjit Singh Bangal. He's a human rights lawyer, and he was astonished that we don't, for example, have DNA profiles in Austria at the moment. Alan, in Austria, they are planning to do exactly that because a huge number of people claiming to have relatives in Austria are coming under false pretenses. They're often not related at all. So they're planning things like DNA databases. We've heard about ankle tags. We've heard about monitoring, about ID cards. But of course, every time this is mentioned, Alan, we have a conversation about, oh, it's breaching their human rights. But if 22,000 people can simply vanish in a puff of smoke, we have to do something.
Higher than that, because we don't actually know the full amount. And look, there are obviously going to be concerns about civil liberties or about human rights, about any of these things. But the reality is, we're not living in the 1950s anymore. We're living in a kind of age when people want to come to this country illegally. They've got no right to be here. They're going to make up reasons why they're coming. And while we're all in favour of people who are genuinely refugees and need to be housed in that way, we've seen the system being abused, and we currently look defenceless in the face of its abuse. So clearly there has to be something done to change that basis of how society acts in this way. And we're going to have to accept, I think, that in 2024 we are going to require some more surveillance and some more techniques to make sure that people do not abscond, because otherwise the alternative is to say to people, we're sitting ducks, it's open season once you come here, doesn't matter if you can legally stay or not, we're not going to stop you.
And that's precisely the case. I mean, let's be absolutely clear, Alan. These are individuals who've been identified as having no claim, no right to remain in the UK. This is not inhumane. They've been through the system. They failed to meet the criteria. They don't have the right to belong in the United Kingdom. Cut and dried. Clear cases. Deportation is the next step. Then they go walkies. And we have this conversation all the time, Alan, about the human rights of these people. What about the human rights of Britons who have no idea who is walking amongst us? What about the human rights of Britons who are saying enough is enough? We're paying for this.
Well, absolutely. And here's the reality. We're saddled with huge costs. And it's a system that doesn't work, as you've identified and highlighted here. The story tells us. I think, one very obvious way this could be avoided is to make sure that the moment a judgment is reached, the person is not allowed at liberty again. They're not at liberty. They've failed in their bid to stay in this country. At that point in time, they should be removed, frankly, immediately. And if they're not removed immediately, they should at least be placed in a holding zone where they can then be removed from, because they've gone through the legal process. We've followed their human rights. We've gone through a system which gave them the opportunity to make their case in law. They had professional advice for it, and they were found wanting. At that point, there is no more human rights concern as such. It's really a question of, can we then fulfil the legal obligations we have to remove people who are not allowed to be here? And that does require, in my view, a very strict and swift system to make sure that happens.
And many people will be crying in agreement with you, Alan, but is that going to happen? We heard last week, Operation Vector, 800 enforcement officers, 800 was 22,000 of these minimum, plus 8 months on top, and that's what we know about. Those who are actually in the system, there may be many, many more who aren't accounted for or aren't on any database. Are we simply fighting pea shooters with tanks?
Well, clearly there's a big problem. We've got, multiple thousands who are missing. We don't have that much resource, it seems, going into finding them. That said, look, I'm not a specialist in this area in the sense I don't know how you go about tracking these people. It may well be there are obvious modes that you will take to track them down. I mean, what's interesting is that there appears to be some confidence these people will be found. I mean, I'm less confident, but specialists appear to believe that there's confidence there. So I think what we've got to do is look at the remedy being proposed. We've got to look at how it works in the coming few months, and we'll soon know, won't we, if it's been successful or not. Because we'll either find those people or we won't. And if we won't, we'll know we didn't put enough resource in and that something desperate needs to be done to locate those who are missing and the many who may go missing in the time between that moment and now.